Here we go. Hi, everyone. I'm Kurek with Frontrunners Innovate, and I have with me, let me make sure I get the name, Mehmet Sukru Guzel. I hope I said that correctly. And Mehmet is actually Turkish. He just told me that. But he is a man of the world. He is global. And what he does is probably one of the hardest jobs I think anybody has ever had, which he does conflict resolution work. And resolutions in looking at what is already laws, I think, if I've got this right. Resolutions that looks at the laws that are already there, looks at what is traditional laws, looks at everything and tries to figure out what is working wrong, what is not doing the right thing, and what is not according to what is supposed to be happening, and righting the wrongs. Therefore, he's probably not the most welcome human being in some boardrooms, but probably the most valuable human being in those boardrooms. So welcome, Mehmet. And the reason why I got connected with you is because of the Center for Peace and Reconciliation Studies, and what we found out that is just the tip of the iceberg with you. I have to ask you, you have to kind of give us a little bit of your background, because my first question would be, are you an attorney? Did you get legal training and entered the legal profession to be able to do a lot of the work that you did? But I'm going to let you tell us what brought you into the work that you're doing.
Let me tell you, I finished economics and I did not have the legal background on international law. And I did not organize myself to be in peace process, or I never thought myself as a human rights defender. And I'm a classical Turkish person who served in the military, who was a commando in the military service, who was in fight with the guerrilla groups in the mountains. I'm a classical Turkish person in a different kind of combat zone coming. And we have got a long period of 30 years of fight with a terrorist organization. But somehow, when I came to Geneva, by chance, I entered the international law, but it's originated from history. When I came to Geneva, and I settled in Geneva, and I was interested in history, and Geneva is a wonderful place because they've got the archives of the League of the Nations and International Red Cross. And because I was interested in the history and the First World War, I began to make research, and I wrote 2 books on the First World War and afterwards. But when you enter the system of writing a history book without a history background using the archival documents, you automatically enter why and how questions, because it is related with the peace process after the First World War to understand the world. And then when I wrote the war crimes against the Ottomans, I first entered the origin of the human rights, beginning of the international humanitarian law. And that when maybe my chance is to begin with the history of law, with the history of human rights. I think you have to think it human rights system as a vice versa triangle. So from the bottom, if you begin working, you go upstairs, and then I think I have got a good understanding of the legal system of the world, because I came to understand the system of the League of Nations and the system of the United Nations. And maybe this is my chance. And this is how I got connected into different conflicts. And maybe this is the really hard problems to be solved. But in a way, I think I managed it.
Wow, just wow. So now that you've gotten into this work, what triggers you go into a location and trying to work on a problem? Do you get a phone call from somebody? And if you do, who is it that calls you in?
I mean, this is really interesting, because when I came to Geneva, I don't know that there is a human rights council inside the UN. And when I first entered the UN, I still did not know that there exists a human rights legal system body. I was just using the archives of the League of the Nations inside the UN. And by chance, you begin to meet with people. And then I entered the system. And during this time, I was interested. I wrote some articles on the I am Turkish and the legal status of the Turkomans in Iraq, in Kirkuk. And there is an article 140, which is legitimized new civil war reason by the United Nations Security Council, and it's a constitutional mistake. So because of this, I involved on the legality of this article, which is a still legalized civil war by the UN Security Council, and I proved that this article is null and void. And when I proved that this article is null and void, to prevent a civil war, from a friend I was nominated to the Nobel Peace Prize, I met with him in a conference from Azerbaijan, and he gave me my degree of professor doctor, honoris causa. And then I began to work on decolonization. When you work on decolonization, I found that the legal thesis of Turkish government is wrong for Cyprus, but I do it in favor of Turkish government. And I prove that the Declaration of Independence of Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus is written wrongly, and I came to a position of changing to UN Security Council resolutions. This is something big, and what has happened when you prove that the legal thesis of a Turkish government is wrong for 40 years, I was put in the censorship and the not blacklist, in the list of non-speaking, because sometimes you say blacklist, and this is racial discrimination. Sorry for my friends, but we got used to that customs. And then by chance in the UN Human Rights Council, I meet a friend, Mr. Leon Coelho. He is asking for the independence of Kingdom of Hawaii from the United States, to the establishment of it. And then we began to work much more on the problem of decolonization, and we were involved in West Papua conflict. And we wrote a book on the modus vivendi situation of West Papua, and again, nominated together with by Mr. William Chang from Hawaii University to the Nobel Peace Prize. And then afterwards, when we are working on,
the 2 nominations so far.
And then people, this is your answer, from Rohingya origin came to me and asked therefore my help on their problems within the government of Myanmar. And it's so funny that I solved their citizenship problem. I mean, more than 1 million of the Rohingyas lost their citizenship, but not only the Rohingyas, nearly all the minorities in a way of losing their citizenship in Myanmar. And I solved this problem. But when you solve a problem, the states do not like you. Before me, Organization of Islamic Conference, all the Rohingya organizations were asking their citizenship rights. But when you solve the citizenship right, they stop asking it. And I was against the case of the genocide case in Myanmar. They put me again in the hated list by the Rohingyas, and the case opened by Gambia. It's a total mistake, because what I try to do is a solution-based approach. What will happen if you prove that there exists a genocide? This is something different. You'll just criminalize some people, but you will criminalize the soldiers. But the soldiers are ready to die. And the prison for a person 70 years old in Netherlands is much better than his house and the hospital in Myanmar. And you cannot make people afraid. And this is not a solution-based approach. They have to go to the International Court of Justice, and the decision can be taken in 6 months' time, because I proved the non-validity of putting out of the citizenship of the Rohingyas. And this is equivalent to the ethnic cleansing when they put it out. And in 6 months' time, they could win the case in the International Court of Justice. And when the International Court of Justice gave the decision on ethnic cleansing, with a higher law, they will regain their citizenship rights. And the case will be finished till today. You can not earn anything by putting the people in prison. And when I work on genocide problems, I mean, I know many leaders of the Uyghurs, and then they say that there is a genocide going on in Xinjiang. But when I worked on it, there exists no genocide, because sometimes people love to use the word, a strong word, that is genocide. And there are some theories of remedial suggestion, and some people want to use it in different ways and in different states. But when you prove, I mean, what is not is why it is there is no genocide in Xinjiang. My article will be published soon. Is that the birth control system in Xinjiang by the China said to be the intent of the genocide, but there is no discrimination for the birth control system. So this is up to the states, and you cannot prove that there is an intent to make genocide. There is no minority discrimination, ethnic or religious, and the same birth control system first time established strongly in Xinjiang in 2017. So when there is a system for the other 54 minorities in China, you cannot use this legal thesis. And the so-called tribunal, there was one in England with so important people, so important academicians from the world, came to a conclusion of a false genocide. I mean, the International Court of Justice between Croatia and Serbia said that there is not intent to say that there is a genocide, but they say that there is the ethnic cleansing. This is my point of view. That why I say that Gambia should have gone to the International Criminal Court instead of International Court of Justice for genocide. And then when you say in the International Court of Justice in the Serbia-Croatia case, even said that even 10,000 people had been killed. This is not shown an intent to genocide. It can happen as war crimes. But when you wrongly define a problem, the result will make you so much, how can I say, negatively. I mean, we should fight for the implementation of human rights, implementation of civil and political rights, economic and social rights. But sometimes this is the problem why I organized the Center for Peace and Reconciliation Studies. The so-called representatives of the people in the diaspora, especially in West, love the problem making. And they feel much more strong when they create much more problems and they can be much more donated. If you go on solution-based approach, you have to create a dialogue with the problematic states. But without creating a dialogue, there will be much more conflict. And states are, a diplomat friend told me, like the human beings. They can get angry, they can be afraid, they can be annoyed, and this is the case. And when I saw so much the problematic of the diaspora representatives of the conflict areas, this is how I entered the peace and reconciliation building, and for the mistakes of peace building. I mean, in a way, I am against the Norwegian peace process because of its mistake, and I was involved in the Sri Lanka peace consolation building. But from the Muslims, the Muslims who want my help, then I understood that they tried to use me against Sri Lanka government. There are three parts: the Tamils, the Sinhalese, and the Muslims. And now I am in the death list of the Tamil Tigers, LTT. Even I got the death threats inside the UN office, Geneva, because they feel themselves as the national liberation movements. And you enter a very dirty system. This is the missing point, for example, an important peace process. This is the Norwegian peace process. I mean, it's so interesting that till 1994, inside the UN legal system, the killing of civilians by the self-identified, self-defined non-state armed groups as national liberation movements accepted as a legal right. In the Geneva Conventions, it was forbidden from 1949 or before. But as a political tool of the states during the Cold War, killing of civilians by the non-state actors never been criminalized. After, thanks to the end of the Cold War, we got some resolutions from General Assembly that killing of civilians is forbidden. Now, the problem of the not definition of for terrorism is the problematic of who has got the right to kill now with person with uniform. I mean, police or soldier. Thanks to God that now killing of civilians is a crime. But very interestingly, still inside the UN during the Human Rights Council, it was so much politicized that they are still legitimizing killing of civilians. I mean, I don't want to give the name of a recognized non-state armed group by the United Nations in a meeting inside the United Nations on forced disappearances. I also mentioned the responsibility of the non-state armed groups in the territories they occupied for the enforced disappearances.
Mhm.
And the representative of this non-state armed group accepted by the UN said that we are supporting the states. And this person, even inside the UN, said that we have got a right for enforced disappearances, that is arbitrary killing. And when you see a dirty world of human rights, we can see that there is a weaponization of human rights, criminalization of human rights, and human rights became an industry. And the human rights industry is focused on creating problems for other states, but not solution-based. I don't want to give the conflict, and it was really interesting. Another human rights session, I was invited by 2 different groups, again, for human rights violations on enforced disappearances.
Mhm.
But they don't want me to talk on the legal background. They give me a list. Can you tell this list? Both sides, because
They give you a script.
so I didn't participate in these meetings, but they don't want the legal background of it because
Mhm.
the other side can be damaged, but they
Mhm.
want me to read the list.
They're going to use you as leverage. Yeah.
So these are the things, and then when you come also the legality of the wars, things become really interesting, and the state doesn't love you.
Yeah.
I mean, like we can say what's going on in Ukraine now.
Mhm.
It is really interesting. I mean, before the attack 2 days ago,
Mhm.
I was never waiting this kind of attack by Putin. I don't want to blame sometimes the states,
Mhm.
but the leaders, the strongman concept. And I was against somehow, I'm against the illegal invention of Iraq by the United States, but I do support limited part of the humanitarian military intervention on Kosovo, but they don't, the United States and NATO doesn't need to bomb Belgrade. This is a catastrophic mistake. And I was waiting Putin to act much more clever way
Mhm.
and logically, and limit the capacity of military movement on the right to self-determination of the Donetsk and Lugansk people for remedial suggestion, because Ukraine doesn't respect the Minsk II agreement. But what we saw is a total military occupation. And then today in my Facebook page, I wrote that, oh, even I am against, the US has a legal background for the refusal of the International Criminal Courts for its soldiers' war crimes. The reason is that because in the Rome Statute, it is written that intent, also intent is the most important.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the US says that my soldiers can make war crimes, but it is me to put them in prison because I do not have the intent to make a crime as a state. This is the legal background. Why the US refused the International Criminal Court? And I do accept this because there is no war without war crimes. It is impossible. This is subject to the human beings. There's always bad guys in the military.
Fascinating. The way that you
But,
point that out.
but when we look at what is going on, it's a crime against it, and nothing can legitimize of attacking a country in a way of preemptive self-defense concept. And this concept was legal before the establishment of United Nations. They can act with limited humanitarian intervention to secure the people. Now I am wondering, will they put it to the International Criminal Court or not? But when you say that this is a crime against peace, this is the legal definition. This is a crime against the peace.
So
And I can say that I lost some states support for me, my work in the future when you say a leader that is must be taken to the International Criminal Court.
yeah, yeah. You know, I am trying to, as you're talking, and this is just fascinating topic, but I'm trying to figure out from the standpoint of simplifying, and there is no simple way to even define what it is that you do. But it's first I had written down, you pull the truth, you like separate. It's like taking a spider web and separating out some of the different, little web pieces out to be able to get to what the heart of the situation is and be able to understand, what the truth is, what the rhetoric is, what the what the intent, and that was the big word that you said, because I had kind of written that down early on, what the intent of what everything else that's already been stated constitutionally done through whatever means it was set out to do, what the intent was really meant to be. And I think that's like you pull that out and you put it to the forefront and you get the truth of where things stand and what they should be and what they're not. And I think that's what to me is so critically needed in all these kind of situations. Now, I think you mentioned the Nobel Peace Prize, but that you've been nominated 3 times for that. And I think that tells you are loved somewhere. So, there are people who appreciate what you're doing, even though you say you're hated when you go to some of these places. But when you look at, because we talked about what's going on today and what might be called to the surface for people to answer to, what do you see this coming year? Because now we've seen this, we saw the Afghanistan, the Taliban situation. We've seen all these kind of things happening that tell us that there's still, and all over Africa, the Sudan keeps having these coups and things like that happen, and they're not the only ones out there that are still, struggling with power and corruption and all different kinds of things. But where do you see 2022? When we come to the end of that, are you seeing more or less of this sort of strife? Are you seeing people finally coming to grips with some of the areas of peace that we can actually grab a hold of and work on to become better?
I mean, this is really something very hard because, people, let's say, not the people, but the people in called with the name of bureaucracy is the most dangerous creator in the world. It doesn't matter they are Chinese, Russian, United States, Turkish, Nigeria, and others. And sometimes peace can be only achieved with the capacity of the bureaucrats. And there is the concept of state survival. And the bureaucrats act according to their obligation of some places for the future of the state and the survival of the state. But now there is so many things going on in the Pacific game. The attempt of US bureaucrats to define a problem of state security of the US as Indo-Pacific is mainly based on trade. Because if China goes in this way, then the economy will collapse for the US. And the US spends so much money on military, and they are the hegemonic power of a liberal idea. And they sometimes do bad things, but they also do good things. So it makes neutralize. But with that, they create a strategy, bureaucrats, to protect the future trade performance of United States, and they create alliances. They say that if you are with China, you cannot with me. So this is something against the World Trade Organization's equal trade position. But this is the origin of the problem. The origin of the problem, sometimes we have to come to the balance of power, omnibalance theory, everything. But all these theories depends on the quality of the bureaucrats. I am not so hopeful for this next 10 or 20 years.
Really?
In fact,
really?
I mean, during the Cold War, there is the capacity of big powers with nuclear balance and proxy wars in Africa or little places, and so many people suffered, and which has never been known. And the bureaucrats try to solve the problems with different ways. But when we come to the concept of state survival, I mean, Israel has a problem of state survival. I mean, this is something good is happening because Arab states now recognize the legality of the state of Israel. which is an important issue for the solution of the Palestinian problem and Palestinian conflict. First, the state must not fear that for its survival. But when we see the Russian and Ukraine problem, Russia is a very weak state, in fact, in circumstances. Maybe it may be interesting to say that Romans become an empire because of their weakness. And Ottoman becomes an empire because of their weakness. And this can last for 600 years. And Russia become an empire because of the weakness of itself and the weakness of the others. When the others get strong, they cannot be empire. So why Putin is afraid and attack Ukraine, and because the bureaucrats of Russia, I do believe, see that the Russia will not be the same after 100 years. And it's acting against Ukrainians as a preventive measure of losing the force, the situation for the future.
So you're saying it's an act of not gaining, but the fear of losing something that's creating this aha. That is a big aha, I think, for a lot of us, to think of it in a little bit different way. But, I was kind of thinking what you were talking about earlier of all the different parts and pieces that go into the peace puzzle or the conflict resolution puzzle is like, you've got to consider the economics and the laws. And what else did I write down? Well, just the human rights, the basic human rights of people. And I'm sure there's another piece or two to that, because you have to add politics in there somewhere. And even though, that might relate to the economics of it, but that's a piece of the puzzle.
But when you take the human rights as a paperwork, it means nothing. It is for the judges in the tribunals, but as separate. But when you try to create peace, you have to understand in which conditions you can make it. I mean, I'm involved in some civil wars or non-state armed groups, guerrilla movements, and looking for it. And then my dream project is to write a book on loser nations. Sometimes states.
Wow, I was just going to ask you when the next book was coming out. You just stated it.
But this is that I began writing 2 or 3 different subjects. I'm not sure which one to finish, but this is my dream project. I mean, sometimes nations or states just lose because of the incapacity of their leaders, other than bureaucrats. I mean, this is Arnold Toynbee, historian, important person, defined as challenge and response. I mean, it's not saying that the Marx dialectic materialism or historical materialism, but it says it's challenge and response. And when you look at so many places and so many people, the nations or non-state art groups, including states, lost because of their challenges and their capacity. They do not understand their capacity. I mean, this is one of the things that the mistake of Ukraine as well, did not understand its capacity and do not implement Minsk II agreement. If they were to implement Minsk II agreement, we will not come to today's position. This is other than the responsibility of Putin. But the challenge and response is the main actor, and the fear of losing by the states. And these fears is the main issue to achieve peace. And I'm not so hopeful for the next 20 years because there are so many differences. I mean, and many ideological or strategic theories were written in the past on concept of hegemony and sovereignty, or sovereignty of the foreign politics of the other states and ally system. Now it is moving too much forward, and the position of the so-called Islamic terrorism, but there is a terrorism using the name of Islam, is the main thing that I'm really afraid of for the coming next 50 years, because they are changing the rhetoric of education of Islam. I mean, the same kind of Islamic education began to be given in Afghanistan, in Philippines, nearly all in Africa, and different parts of the world. And even some religious group use the same religious books for education the young as the Al-Qaeda.
Wow.
This is the most important problem for the future. We need to create how we can, I mean, maybe Islam should return back to the origin secular system, because a false narrative on Islam has been had been written lately, and they are accepted these books much more valuable than the Quran, that is the purest things.
Wow.
This is the things that I'm afraid. And you can easily be put in that list of the other things, because in the name of God, it is easy to be killed. And the main problem, when you say that there's another Islam of the Caliphate, and the Quran doesn't say this, they are to lose their hegemony, their way of living. And the concept of social anthropological changement of the Islam culture in all the world is a big danger. I mean, the people began to, the women began to act like the woman in Afghanistan. Their changement of clothes, their changement of praying style, their isolation from the other groups. And the minority groups, this is really interesting. In Sri Lanka, I know some Muslims who came to me, and they are cooperative with LTT of Sri Lanka. And then LTT made mosque massacres. But when terrorism has no religion, LTT has been working with Al-Qaeda for so many years. And in the internet, you can see them. And even they made ethnic cleansing to 80,000 Muslims. But now they are reunited together.
Wow.
And so these are the things. And even this is accepted by Al-Qaeda or other Islamic radicalized groups. They can do everything to achieve their program. And when we have got some people, and for example, if you have to understand the psychology of a suicide bomber, when goes to the church and kill children, he feels himself happy, because he says that I prevent their future sins. And I am the
What
holy
we can
person.
convince ourselves of.
So there is there is no humanity, or there is nothing in Islam. But the other books that I mentioned, they say that you have to prevent the sins of the future, and paradise will be guaranteed for you.
This is a subject that's so deep that we could spend the whole day on it and it still wouldn't be enough. I mean, it's just absolutely fascinating. And the work that you do is so crazy, but so valuable. And I think that we need 10 more like you around, just to bring some truth and some light to some very dark places. And, you know, I don't know, but I'm hoping that you do have a book coming out soon.
I mean, I'm writing in 3 different subjects, and I give a, how can I say, a pause of writing book. Now I think I solved the South-China dispute.
I'll tell you what, well, while you're writing, we'll find.
But this will be
we'll
articles.
But, we'll find you.
But I've got good friends in Philippines, but I solve it in favor of China. But this is just a book. I have got some notes. Maybe I would like to write on a different kind of, maybe my books were 2 on history, and the others are on international law, basically on decolonization. But I want to write a book on international relations this time. Maybe this is why I will.
I can tell you that will be a textbook, and that will be a book that's used in universities everywhere, I do believe. I just can't imagine there's too many people that have the experience and expertise that you do, and to be able to share it in a way that makes such a difference and such an impact out there in the world. I have somebody I would like to introduce you to, and I will tell you about that in just a few minutes. But let me do this. I always end every, conversation like this with asking the person that I'm interviewing, are there any people out there that you feel like you would like to meet that would help move what you're doing forward, or people that you feel like you just want to engage with, whether they be partners or some other types of, government leaders in other locations or diplomats somewhere? But who might you need to meet?
I mean, I am open to all engagement. I am not limited for anything because I am not supporting someone in favor. I mean, open and neutral, and I try to be neutral. I mean, this is the interesting case. I've got a friend from Japan, and he's a diplomat, and I am also advisor for Okinawa independence movement. And so this is how I try to be.
And to do what you do.
Kashmir, the Kashmiris living in Pakistan, but they are opposing the Pakistan government, are also my friends. And the Kashmiris acting against India are also my friends. I try to be respectful, subject to the paperwork. I mean, for example, I don't want to give the names, but the leaders of the Uyghurs as in the diaspora living in refugee are my friends, and I say that there's no genocide in Xinjiang, and I'm against their support for the so-called tribunal in England. And I can say that they are making mistake because this is a challenge and response game. If you condemn of a crime never happened, the response will be much more different. And the China state thinks that they've got another political roadmap. But when the state thinks that there's another political roadmap, you cannot achieve what the dialogue. When there is no dialogue, we cannot go forward. This is the situation.
Well, in peace building, that is exactly, I would expect that of you, that you would have to be able to see all sides and understand everybody's a human being, and we all have the different viewpoints, and so many things are based on agendas. So you kind of have to, keep that neutral ground solid, and keep that going. I'm going to say thank you so much for spending this time with us today. This has been a pleasure and an eye-opener, like I haven't had in a long time. And we look forward to sharing this with everybody. And we'll let everybody know where they might be able to find you, certainly on LinkedIn. But any kind of links you can share with us where your works might be found, your articles or anything else that you're writing on or speaking on might be found, we'd ask you to share those links with us. So you stay on. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody else. And so if you're watching this on YouTube, go to www.frontrunnersinnovate.com and you'll see this interview and all the links and any other information that we can extract from Mehmet. So thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.